you'll even go on to do your master's or maybe even a PhD. These are the things you're going to need to know. Let's delve right in to our chapter. This is a historical look of cremation. This is very cool. I'm a history nut. I love looking back at ancient cultures to see how they did things and why they did things. And in this first chapter, we look and say, what did cremation look like in ancient cultures? Cremation is not a new thing. It's not even a kind of new thing. It's not even an American thing. And when we think about how ancient cultures handled the dead, we learn a lot about where we are today. On page 1, the text says that it's believed that the first cremations took place about 3000, I should say BC, during the early Stone Age. There's your in-text citation, Fritsch and Altieri, 2021, page 1. Where did I find that quote? Page 1 of this book. So remember that. The first cremation was about 3000 BC. So that is, what does BC mean? It means before Christ. So if you think about Bible times, this was 3,000 years before that. Old, ancient. In the text, we're going to look at Greeks, Romans, and Scandinavians. And you may be familiar with some of these because this is where a lot of our rituals come from. Page 2 starts with the Greeks. In ancient Greece, the cremation of a well-known person was a public event. Can you imagine? See the pyre behind them standing? Often, the cremation was lit by a close friend or the eldest son of the deceased. We have some cultures that do that today. Have you ever attended a cremation? Have you ever performed a cremation, maybe at your funeral home or crematory where the family is present? Have you ever been there where a family member lights the cremation? Yeah, it still happens today. One of the things we got from the Greeks was this idea of reverence for the dead. This was the first time in our ancient history that we saw people being put on a pedestal and honored. Think about laying in state. We get this from the Greeks. Remember, too, what is the idea of heaven or the perfect afterlife in Greek mythology? Elysian fields. That's right. Pull that back from your history class. That is one of the ideas, that fire is pure. And that is the quickest way to send the soul in a reverent way to the Elysian fields. Very, very cool. Page 3 then goes to the Romans. Romans were similar to the Greeks, but Romans to release doves. They had this funeral rite where they released doves. Now, if you know anything about Roman history, they were very structured. You think about Roman soldiers. You think about a lot of Bible times, and Rome was a mega power. Rome is the first place that we start to see the undertaker, a professional person for this cause. Before that, it had always been somebody that's religious. You call a priest, you call a pastor, you call a clergy, you call a scribe, you call a holy man, and they deal with the dead. Now you're starting to see a person just for this funeral rite, which is really cool. Greeks were really big about symbolism. You notice in Greek mythology, Greek history, you see a lot of statues. You see the Caesar, the look of Caesar with the greenery on the head. Rome symbolism was really big in eagles and golden sepulchres and things about architecture. One of the things that symbolism is a excuse me, is a bird of freedom. So they release the dove. That's where we get a dove release, all the way back to Rome. Moving a little bit forward on page 4, we're looking at the Scandinavians. Now, Scandinavians is what you might think about when you think Vikings. These people were nomadic, but these people came way before. So you're thinking about European in the countryside, in the hills. This is the Nordic, the Viking, the fighters. When you think about history, if you've seen the show Vikings, that's what we're talking about, the most early version. Historical scholars have determined that people of ancient Scandinavia performed cremations for an estimated 2,000 years without any influence from the Greeks or the Romans. So you see here, early Scandinavians and then Greeks and Romans, they were all doing these cremations, but they didn't impact each other. It's not like the Scandinavians got this idea from the Greeks or the Romans. They were miles apart, they were cultures apart, they were years apart. Scandinavians believed that you had to protect yourself from the dead because they were warriors in life, they would be warriors in death. So they thought that if you did not pay homage or do this right with fire, that they could come back and ruin your life. They also saw this as a way to free them. If you did not free them correctly, they would stay among the living and wreak havoc. And you can see this belief from the way that they lived. They were conquerors, they were foragers. Most people, get ready, I'm going to blow your mind here, think, and you even because you see it on television, that the Vikings would light the boat on fire in the water. That may have happened some rarely, maybe, but not really. You see, because they believed that what you needed for the afterlife should be cremated with you in the dirt. So, yes, they would take your boat because in Scandinavian culture, you handcrafted your boat. That was your show of wealth. That was your show of talent, of skill. That's what you conquered other people and other lands with. They would fill it with the possessions that you needed. They would fill it with gold. They would fill it with food, clothes, tools, knives, whatever. And they would often put your living wife or a volunteer in the boat with you, burn them alive along with the decedent, and then they would cover all of that in dirt and bury it together so that your soul got everything it needed, could gather the things and free to the afterlife, to Valhalla. So when you go to some of these ancient lands, you can still see burial mounds, and they are very sacred. That's really cool. If you've never watched any of that, look that up. It's very neat. As time goes, let's talk about the United States. How did we get from the ancient world performing cremation to here in the United States? Well, your text notes two very important dates or times. The first one was the first cremation pyre performed in the United States other than indigenous Indians. American Indians were known for using fire for cremation in an outdoor setting, but this is where it became an institution. Colonel Henry Lawrence was the former president of the Continental Congress. Think American Revolution. How fitting, right here at America 250. So one of our revolutionary fathers was lit in a cremation pyre. It was outside. Okay. So think about the practice of ancient, also American Indians. In the United States, we see a high member of the Continental Congress choose this. Talk about a turning point, right? This is a shift in perspective. That was 1792 when Colonel Henry Lawrence was cremated outdoors. Not long after that, Dr. Francis Lemoyne had the first crematory in the United States. This is him right here. He built the first retort. And it was not long until he had his first organized cremation. Here's a illustration of it. So the crematory in 1876, Baron de Palm's body was placed in this preheated chamber. The first cremation in a modern chamber or retort, it took 36 hours to complete, was used as fuel, and 50 bushels were consumed. Isn't that interesting? The total process cost $7.04. That was a lot of money in 1876. Think about what was going on in American history. The Civil War was about 1865, and that's where we just started getting embalming. So when you think about the history and how these things fall in the timeline, this is an innovative time for the funeral world. We're going from undertakers building toe pinchers to our soldiers going off to war and having to find a way to get them home in a decent condition, and to also to cremation, modern cremation. So if you think about what stokes the fire, notice it doesn't say gas. As this time of our history, we don't have indoor plumbing, we don't have indoor heat, we have fire. How do you make fire? Like the Boy Scouts, right? And he added Coke, which is amazing. In these days, this is a side note from a history buff, Coke actually had cocaine in it. Interesting. This, I want to pull up our text because there's some arguments for cremation. In 1878, how do you talk to people that have no experience with this? How do you tell people this is a good idea and this is how you should do it? Well, unfortunately, then the goal was oratory. So if somebody wanted to campaign for something, it was about how could you talk people into it. This is where modern debate comes from. So I want to look at these in your text with you, values or maybe this debate for cremation. And I'll tell you a couple of the againsts in a few moments. But of course, Dr. Lemoyne and some of the other scientists said that to argue for cremation, the first thing was that it's natural. The role of removing decomposing matter, that it's God's will to protect the health and life of the living by removing the dead. Cremation simply is more efficient. That was the argument number one. Two was sanitation. Odors of decomp, people seeing decomp, the bacteria. Cremation takes away this element from society and even takes away the idea of decomposing in a grave. Now, remember, this is a time before modern embalming, modern vault, modern perpetual care cemeteries, right? This is put a body in the dirt or in a wooden casket in a churchyard. And he's saying, you know what? Forget the stink, forget the decomp. Cremation is clean and it fixes that. Economically, he said, you spend so much money on all this stuff with monuments, you can spend that more wisely. This is cheaper. This one was a big one. Lemoyne claimed that the Bible did not fully support burial or cremation, leaving it open for decision. This was a big one. This caused waves. He says, you know what? The Bible doesn't really say right, wrong, or indifferent. It's up to the person to choose. Then he said, socially, the poor spend so much money trying to look wealthy and they really can't afford it. This is better for society all around. This is a way to respectfully deal with death that doesn't break the bank and it doesn't put people in a position of keeping up with the Joneses, which is interesting to me. Politically, he said that it makes everyone equal. Cremation treats the body of a prince just like it does as a peasant. This makes all things equal. Now, interestingly, in history, this has been said about death. Death knows no man. Death doesn't care if you're rich, you're poor, you're black, you're white, you're old, you're young. Death comes to everyone. Death is universal. And I like how he said, you know what? Cremation treats you that way. Cremation is not a respecter of persons. And it's interesting to see the viewpoint and see how he politicked this, right? The common saying is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. You're going to hear some of these arguments today. Now, let me give you some arguments against. In that day and time, we were in the Reformation movement in America. People wanted to get back to the Bible. They wanted to escape the Roman Catholic Church of Europe. They wanted to get away from English religion as a government. And so here we were very, very focused on Protestantism. We were focused on freedom of religion. And the idea was that cremation would ruin the body. And when the Lord returns, there would be no body to meet him in the air. So they said, well, if you kill a body, what's the Lord going to raise? That was argument number one. Argument number two was that Jesus Christ was buried in a tomb. He was not cremated. If that's the right thing to do, or if it was acceptable, why didn't he do it? That was the next argument. The next argument was when you are cremated, it's incomplete. This is a time where the Freemasons were building huge monuments, beautiful monuments. Think about it. This is the time where to award someone or honor someone, you built a monument at their grave. People would go and the cemetery, think Memorial Day, think old cemeteries. This is the time that they were living. So they said, well, if you cremate somebody, there is no marker. There's no place for a monument. There's no place for them to rest. They'll be in upheaval. There is no place for their children to come visit. There is nowhere for somebody to celebrate. They also thought it was very taboo to keep ashes. Keep ashes in the house was to focus on the unreligious part of death. The Bible says that we don't grieve as other people grieve that have no hope. So they said that keeping ashes was not giving them to the Lord. Those are some of the arguments. It's really, really interesting to me how these things come about in history. So let's go back to our slideshow. I wanted to spend some time on those arguments because I think it's cool, but it's nice to see the thinking of the time. Purification. There was a sect or a group of people that believed that reforming burial customs meant evolving as a society. This was seen as kind of a revival, and it began in the 1870s. So remember, the Civil War has just ended. The country is now it's broken. They are in I mean, everything. People are poor. People are starving. The country is upside down. There are dead everywhere. People have to clean up their towns. People have to find a new way. Soldiers are coming back maimed and limbs and all the things. Here's a statement that came out in the Latin: verbimus erepti, curo consumimur igni, means saved from worms, purified by consuming flame. Think about what this is meant to do. This is good marketing, right? Good marketing. Because why? Because the Bible says that the Lord and his salvation is like a consuming fire. There was a time in the New Testament where it is said that the Holy Spirit descended and looked as if it were tongues of fire. This is great marketing, right? Saved from worms. We're playing a little bit on people's fear. About this time in American history, there came a nursery rhyme. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle on your snout. Something about the graveyard and something about being buried. It's playing on the fears of death. Very, very propaganda. That's the word. So cremation's earliest supporters aligned themselves and began to form societies that would market the reasons why this reform should happen. A particularly important method for early cremationists was to publish things, whether that be posters, newspapers, letters, all kinds of things in print. So we go from oration, from stump speeches, to putting out propaganda. This is why you should be cremated. An all-consuming fire, refiner's fire, pure and holy. Some of those still exist. If you look into this, you can see quite a bit. Then we start going to being architecturally significant. We now have our values in print or in oration, and now we want to look beautiful because this gives credence, this gives credibility to being cremated. Look at this crematorium. Holy mackerel. That's beautiful. That is beautiful. So, what could be ugly about that? What could be not society perfect about that? This is kind of bougie. This might be where the rich and famous go. This may be the new thing. It is gorgeous. I'd love to have it. Can you imagine if your funeral home had a crematorium? That's just a crematorium. I want a bell tower on mine. Then, after that, became a standard manual. You can Google this and read it. A lot of it we still do today, but it's an idea about how you operate and the catechism of memory. So if you're just going to burn somebody, how do you make it a memorial? How do you put meaning to it for the family that's left behind? And friends, that's something we are still fighting today. There is a huge context of direct cremation that people regret. And I could spend hours talking about that. I'll give you just a little peek. There are those that pick direct cremation because that's exactly what they want, that's exactly what they need, and they've planned on it all along. For those people, it's wonderful. Then there are people that they feel they are forced to choose direct cremation because they did not plan, they have no funds, maybe they have no support system, and they have to. That can inhibit the grief process. Then there is another still sect that will pick direct cremation because they don't know what their options are or they never thought about what they might want or need. They've inexperienced. So the question of why are people choosing it? And some of that's our fault, friends, as directors and marketers. If these places that are marketing no contact, you just sign this DocuSign and that's all it is. We've missed a stellar opportunity to care for people. We've missed it. There's very few segments in our population that truly understand or want zero contact. That's my soapbox. I'll leave it there. Along 1913, this time in our history, we're starting to have all kinds of innovations. Like this is when we get penicillin. This is right before the First World War. And Cana, are you familiar with Cana? Absolutely. The biggest undisputed source for cremation education statistics and information. The folks at Cana are fantastic. I follow them, I'm friends with them. I love the things they put out. Cana is the Cremation Association of North America. They will do your cremation certification, they do education, they do all kinds of things. But they really, in 1913, Dr. Erickson set the standard for doing this the right way. That no, you cannot burn more than one at a time. No, you cannot have dirty retorts. No, you cannot. Thou shalt. The right way to do this. You'll notice that every horror story that you hear where people do cremation incorrectly goes against every principle that we have and every regulation from Cana. In your module, I gave you a link to Cana where they talk about the history and explore their website a little bit, because as you grow and develop in this industry, you need to know and use them. They are fantastic. Some of our best and brightest in the industry are at Kane. After that, page 6 talks about making a memorial around an urn. It was weird in our history to have a funeral without a body. That's where we then came up with a memorial service. We figured out, hey, they don't have to be here. It could be posthumously. They don't have to be here. Now in our society, we give people degrees after they're dead. We give them honorary dinners after they're dead. We do all kinds of things posthumously. That's where it started. This idea of memorial and the idea of an urn, make it pretty. Normally, a memorial urn has imperishable material. It's not wood. Think about metal. It has an engraving on it, and it is permanent placement. So when they first came up with this concept, they were making a more tangible way to make this honorable, respectful, and final. Scattering really wasn't a thing yet. The memorial idea said that no cremation was complete without interment, which meant in this time in history that imperishable material, engraving on it, and a placement of it. And of course, cremation as we know it today, it expanded like wildfire. Yeah, tongue-tied. The Lemoyne Crematory was the only one in the country for almost a decade. And then there were 12 more, and then 25 more, and then 109 more. So not by 1928, think about right before the Great Depression, World War I, the Spanish flu, 109 crematories had been built in the U.S. and over 100,000 cremations had been performed. Cana says that there are 5 primary reasons why people choose cremation. Saves money, saves land, it's simpler, the body's not buried in the earth, and just personal preference. Those statistics may not be what you thought they would be. Most people will tell you now, oh, it's just simpler. But that may not be the reason. It may be that they can't afford anything else. They do not know the options. They don't have a support system or a good understanding of how it works. That's where you and I come in. Simplification. In the 1960s, we're getting closer now. This is going to be your grandparents, maybe your parents' era, is remarkably fast with the change. This change decidedly it came from people that just wanted less. They wanted less than the pomp and circumstance. They wanted less than the Victorian plumes on the horses. They wanted less than the carriages and the sitting up with the dead all night. They just wanted less. To get back to the basics. Everything was shook on its head when Jessica Mitford wrote The American Way of Death. And you've probably heard about this in mortuary school at this point. She changed everything, and she has about a half of a point, but a lot of it is just a gripe. She gripes that funeral directors are in it just to make money. They're going to rip you off. Everything's so expensive. Why you got to pay for that? Actually, you don't have to pay for that. That they're all thieves and they're con men, and she makes it like a used car lemon lot, right? And people start to realize that you're right, I don't have to be buried. And if I don't have to be buried, I don't have to buy a casket. And if I don't have to buy a casket, I don't have to sit there and look at the body for 24 hours. And if I don't have to do that, I don't have to buy a pall. And if I don't have to do that, I don't have to invite people. And if I don't have to do that, I don't have to have the preacher. And I don't have to have hellfire and brimstone over the body. They're awakened to this idea that you can hold a memorial even with or without cremation. So as things came to be simplified, cremations was just about equipment. It wasn't about going to this place like the big architecture we saw and having a memorial. You could do it anywhere. Do it by the lake, do it at your church, do it at your house, do it in the backyard, do whatever. This is where we came to simplify. This is where home funerals started. You think that that's a new thing? It's not. Green burials, even. No, we've been doing that a long time. This is where the simplification with personalization really started in America in the 60s. Families who choose cremation now have different reasons than those of the 60s. Right now, there's all kinds of reasons that they might choose cremation, and they have all kinds of options about what takes place afterwards. Whether they want to ship the remains to another country, whether they want to scatter, whether they want to jewelry, thumbprints, whatever. Services too are now personalized. Catering, music, they've all these options. The choice is as broad as their imagination. You know, it's kind of like buying a car. You can buy a Pinto or you can buy a Cadillac. You can buy it in a crazy color or you can buy it in standard. You can have whatever you want. It is up to you what you need, what fits your budget, and what fulfills your needs. And I would say that that is the last thing that we have to really consider when we are trying to sell something. What do they need? There are some people that will absolutely tell you they want copper on copper and it'll be a $16,000 grave sign. What's the reason why? The last one of those that I had said that's what my dad picked out for himself, and we want the same thing for our mom so that they match. That's a totally different reason than, well, we have to buy that. We have to buy the most expensive thing to show that we love our mother. That's a totally different thing. With people that come in and say, I want the bare minimum because money's not as important as our family and the time together. I want to spend more time in visitation. I want to spend more time this, that, or the other. Either way is fine. We need to know that their options, one, are from a place of informed consent. Do they understand the options and what is required and what's not? Here's your options. Here's what I can recommend, and here's why. All about choice. I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate your attention this morning. I'm excited about this class. Reach out to me, anything that you need. I'm happy to talk one-on-one. We can meet anytime via Teams. You're welcome to call me or text me. I'm in the Nashville area, so I'm happy to oblige if I can help you in any way. Have a wonderful day.